All right, so you guys really sent us down a rabbit hole with this one. The Superbike Motorsports murders from 2003. We're going to try to untangle this whole thing. We're looking at witness accounts and police records, even some FBI profiler notes.
Yeah, this is one of those cases that just grabs you right from the start. You've got Superbike Motorsports. This place was like a thriving hub for motorcycle lovers right in rural South Carolina. And then all of a sudden, it's the scene of this brutal crime.
It's November 6th, 2003, and they find the shop owner, Scott Ponder, along with his mom, Beverly Guy, the service manager, Brian Lucas, and the mechanic, Chris Sherbet, all shot dead execution style. Just like that, a place full of life turns into a crime scene.
And it's the lack of a clear motive that's so perplexing. No robbery, no signs of a struggle, just cold, calculated killings.
It's just hard to even fathom.
The first person to find this horrific scene was Noel Lee, a close friend of Scott's. Can you imagine the shock of walking into that?
I mean, the police initially looked at everything right, like a rival business, a disgruntled customer, even a drug deal gone wrong. You'd think with such a violent crime, something would point them in the right direction.
You would think so, but every theory they had just seemed to evaporate. No money was missing, no signs of forced entry, and while Chris Sherbet did have some minor drug charges, there was nothing to link him to this level of violence.
No, so they're hitting dead end after dead end.
Yeah.
So you've got this seemingly motiveless crime on their hands, and then there's No Lee, finds the bodies, calls 911 from the shop phone instead of his own. It all seemed a little suspicious at first glance.
It definitely raised eyebrows. The investigators had to consider every possibility, but in the end, they were able to clear Noel Lee's name. But that didn't get them any closer to finding the real killer.
So they're still stuck.
Yeah, they even looked into a possible connection to this unsolved bank robbery that happened a few months earlier in a nearby town. The killings were similarly methodical, and there was a red car spotted at both scenes. But even that lead fizzled out.
So a year passes, the case goes cold, and then this DNA bombshell drops. Scott's wife, Melissa Bremen, had their son Scotty just a few months after the murders. But then DNA testing revealed that Scott wasn't the father.
And as if that wasn't enough of a twist, the tests showed that the father was actually Brian Lucas Scott's best friend.
It's like straight out of a soap opera.
Yeah, it was a mess.
Hmm.
Rumors started swirling instantly. Was there an affair? Was Melissa somehow involved? The whole situation was a whirlwind.
It's hard to believe this wasn't already complicated enough. But wait, there's another twist. It turns out there was a mix-up with the DNA evidence from the crime scene.
Yeah, this is where the case takes a turn into the realm of, forensic science and its fallibility. Scott's DNA had been mislabeled as Brian's,
Oh, wow.
which ultimately cleared Melissa's name, but it makes you wonder, how often does this happen? And how much faith can we really put in DNA evidence?
It definitely raises some questions. You have a grieving widow dealing with this unimaginable loss, and then she's thrust into this whirlwind of suspicion and scrutiny, all because of a lab mistake. It's just a stark reminder that even with all the technology we have, human error can have such a huge impact.
Absolutely. And in this case, it just added another layer of complexity to this already baffling investigation. The focus shifted away from Melissa, but that still left investigators with the same frustrating question: who killed these four people at Superbike Motorsports?
So years go by, the trail runs cold, and then in 2016, a missing persons case in Anderson County, South Carolina, throws this completely unexpected wrench into the investigation. Charlie Carver and his girlfriend Alana Jones vanish without a trace. Seems totally unrelated at first, but
But there's something about the activity on Charlie's social media after he disappears that's just unsettling. Posts about milestones in his relationship with Alana, pregnancy, buying a house, even getting married, all logged retrospectively. It's like anyone who knew Charlie could tell something was terribly wrong.
and it turns out those instincts were spot on. Charlie's ex-wife Nicole had a history of stalking him. She was behind those posts, even impersonated a police officer at one point. It's chilling how someone can manipulate online platforms like that. But as the investigation into Nicole unfolds, a major break comes from analyzing Charlie and Alana's cell phone data.
Yeah, investigators were able to use those cell phone pings to pinpoint a rural property in Woodruff, South Carolina, owned by a man named Todd Kohlhepp. And that's where these two stories, separated by more than a decade, start to intersect in the most unexpected way.
Hold on, because what happens next is truly unbelievable. The police raid Kohlhepp's property and find Alana Jones alive but chained and traumatized inside a locked shipping container. It's a moment of sheer relief and utter horror all at once.
Alana's rescue was nothing short of miraculous, and her story was even more harrowing. She revealed that she had been kidnapped by Todd Kohlhepp, who had shot and killed Charlie Carver and held her captive for months.
And suddenly, the seemingly unrelated missing persons case becomes this terrifying glimpse into the mind of a potential serial killer. The question is, who is Todd Kohlhepp, and what connection, if any, does he have to the Superbike murders?
Well, that's where things take an even darker turn. Kohlhepp's past is a troubling mix of red flags and missed opportunities. He had a difficult childhood, a violent rape conviction at the age of 15, and spent years in prison. It's a pattern that sadly often repeats itself.
It's like looking back and seeing all these warning signs, all these missed chances to intervene. But then after his release, Kohlhepp manages to build what seemed like a successful life. As a real estate agent, no less, he was buying property, driving fancy cars, all while hiding this dark side.
And that's what's so disturbing. He was able to blend in to present this facade of normalcy while harboring such darkness within. But even behind that carefully constructed facade, there were cracks. Boasting about weapons online, leaving unsettling comments. It's almost like he was daring someone to notice.
Like he wanted to be caught.
It's certainly possible. There's a psychology to these types of killers that we may never fully understand. But one thing's for sure, those signs were there. And unfortunately, they were missed. But what about the Superbike case? How does this seemingly random real estate agent connect to a quadruple homicide from over a decade earlier?
That's the question that had investigators on the edge of their seats. And the answer, as we'll uncover, is even more shocking than they could have imagined.
It wasn't just like a few offhand comments, as some of the things Kohlhepp wrote online were truly chilling. Like his reviews for things like padlocks and knives, they were disturbing, to say the least. There's one where he talks about assaulting someone with a padlock and a sock.
That's just, wow. I don't even know what to say to that. It's like he was practically screaming his dark fantasies to the world. But how could something like that slip through the cracks?
That's a question that haunts this entire case. How did someone with such a violent past and such blatant red flags manage to fly under the radar for so long? It's a failure on multiple levels. The justice system, background checks, even just basic awareness from those around him.
And tragically, those failures had devastating consequences. So the police have Kohlhepp in custody. Alana Jones is safe, but as we know, this is far from over. She mentioned Kohlhepp bragging about other victims, right?
Yes, and this is where the Superbike case comes roaring back into the picture. During questioning, Alana mentions that Kohlhepp had described walking into a motorcycle shop and killing 4 people years ago, and that detail sent chills down the investigators' spines.
You can practically hear the screeching halt of every other case they were working on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, all eyes are back on the Superbike murders.
Mm-hmm.
Did they press him for more details?
Absolutely. They had to know if this was just a sick boast or something more, and what they uncover is even more disturbing than they could have imagined. Kohlhepp starts describing the Superbike killings with this chilling level of detail, even using military jargon.
That's just creepy. Does that kind of language suggest anything about his mindset?
It's certainly fascinating from a psychological perspective. Was it a sign of specific training, a way to dehumanize his victims, or simply a desire to appear powerful and in control? It's something that criminal profilers could analyze for years. But beyond the language itself, the details he provided were startling. He knew things that had never been released to the public, confirming that he was telling the truth.
So how did this seemingly random real estate agent even end up on the radar of Superbike Motorsports? Did he have some connection to the shop or the victims?
It's a bizarre twist, really. He had visited Superbike Motorsports a few times back in 2003, even bought a bike there. But then his bike was stolen, and he became convinced that the shop was somehow involved.
Wait, so he went from being a customer to murdering 4 people because of a stolen bike? Does that even make sense?
It's hard to grasp the logic or lack thereof behind such a horrific act. But in Kohlhepp's twisted mind, it was justification enough. And later investigators found his name in Superbike's customer database. He had even received a letter from them on the 10th anniversary of the murders asking for any information.
That's insane. This guy was sitting on this horrific secret for over a decade, even playing the concerned customer. It's almost too much to process.
It's a chilling example of how a seemingly normal person can be living this double life, hiding unimaginable darkness beneath the surface. And sadly, the horrors don't stop there. On Kohlhepp's property, they uncover another grave.
You've got to be kidding me. More victims.
Tragically, yes. The grave belonged to another missing couple, Johnny and Megan Coxey, who had vanished in 2015. Kohlhepp admitted to luring them to his property with the promise of work and then killing them both.
So we've got 4 murders at Superbike Motorsports, 2 more on his property, and Alana Jones's terrifying ordeal. This isn't just a killer. It's a pattern of violence spanning years.
And Kohlhepp seemed almost proud of it. He confessed to all 7 murders and even bragged about potentially having even more victims, claiming his body count was in the high double digits.
Those words just send a shiver down your spine.
Wow.
Was there any truth to his claims? Did investigators find any evidence to support the idea of more victims?
They investigated every lead, every whisper of a possibility. They looked into his claim of killing someone as part of a gang initiation when he was just 14 years old, but they couldn't find any evidence to corroborate it.
But given his history, it's a chilling possibility. He served 15 years for the kidnapping and rape of a 14-year-old girl in Arizona when he was just 15 himself. It's a pattern of disturbing behavior that escalated over time. And to think, after all, that he was able to slip back into society so seamlessly.
That's perhaps the most unsettling aspect of this whole case. No background check for his real estate license, no one connecting the dots on his violent past, and he was even able to buy guns illegally. It's a sobering reminder of how our systems can fail to protect the innocent from predators like Kohlhepp.
It makes you wonder how many other Kohlhepps are out there. How many other ticking time bombs are hiding in plain sight?
That's the question that keeps investigators up at night, and it's the question that lingers in the minds of anyone who hears this story.
So what happened next? Justice had to be served right.
Absolutely. In May of 2017, Kohlhepp was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He'll never see the outside of a prison cell again, but that doesn't erase the pain and suffering he inflicted on so many people.
It's a bittersweet resolution. Justice was served, but the scars of his crimes run deep.
It's a strange mix of emotions, isn't it? Like relief that he's behind bars, but also this lingering sense of unease. Like, how could someone like this even exist?
It really is unsettling. It makes you confront the fact that evil can be hiding anywhere, sometimes right under our noses, disguised as something totally normal. It really challenges you to think about who you can trust. It also makes you think about the victims' families. Imagine Scott Ponder's son growing up without a father, knowing this guy is just living out his days in prison. What kind of closure can there even be in a situation like that?
There's no easy answers there. For the families, I imagine it's this wave of emotions, grief, anger, maybe even a sense of relief that the ordeal is finally over. But the scars are still there. Those lives can never be replaced.
No, they can't. And we may never fully understand the whys and hows of it all. It's just a reminder that justice, even when it's served it, can't erase the pain and trauma. But speaking of justice, it took over a decade to solve the Superbike case. The investigators never gave up, though.
That's right. They were incredible interrogatories, really persistent, dedicated to finding the truth no matter how long it took. Even after 13 years, they were still chasing leads, hoping for that break in the case.
It makes you wonder if Alana Jones hadn't been found, if she hadn't mentioned that confession about the motorcycle shop. Would we still be talking about the Superbike murders as an unsolved case?
It is a chilling thought. It makes you realize how much chance plays a role sometimes, how seemingly unrelated events come together to bring a killer to justice. It was really a combination of things, police work, technology, and a bit of luck.
It reminds you that even when things seem the darkest, there's always hope. The resilience of those families, the dedication of the investigators, it's powerful stuff.
It is, and I think that's one of the biggest takeaways here. The reminder that even though there's darkness in the world, there's also strength and courage and people fighting for what's right. It might not always be easy, but it's there.
So as we wrap up this incredibly complex and disturbing deep dive, what stands out the most to you? The nature of the crimes, the resilience of the victims and investigators, or the fact that he was finally brought to justice?
I think for me, it's just how unsettling it is that someone like Kohlhepp could just blend in and live among us. It forces us to confront the darkness that can hide inside people we think we know, to be more aware of the signs. Those online comments, those reviews, they were all right there for anyone to see. Makes you think about all the information we see every day and the things we might be missing.
It really does.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. We need to trust our gut feelings more. If something doesn't feel right, we need to speak up. Maybe if we're all a little more aware, we can prevent another Kohlhepp from hurting anyone else.
That's the goal. We may never fully understand what drives someone to do these things, but we can learn from it and try to create a world where it happens less.
This deep dive has been quite a journey and a reminder that the search for truth and justice is never really over. We hope you learned something today, not just about this case, but about the world around us and how we can all play a part in making it a safer and more just place for everyone.